The British send a fleet of warships to Boston. They encircle the harbor as if it were an enemy port. The ships clear their guns, ready for firing. The greatest fear of the colonists, British tyranny, seems to have come true. The port of Boston is closed. Massachusetts is put under military rule. Its government enforced at the point of a gun.
I woke last night shaking from a frightful dream. We have come to the edge of the ocean, and there is no advancing or retreating. My own sons may sink in the torrent. I pray that there be some decent, honorable way to put an end to this conflict. To be once again reconciled with old friends. Our cause is righteous, and I have no doubt of final success. But I see our generation, and perhaps our whole land, drowned in blood.
Hello, I'm Forrest Sawyer. Welcome to Program 2 of Liberty. Looking back at our history, the break with England seems so inevitable. But in the 1770s, it wasn't at all obvious to the 3 million British colonists living in what is now the United States. They loved England. Even after the shooting war had begun, the vast majority of the people in America were extremely reluctant to make the final break with their mother country. Back in 1774, as Ben Franklin put it, nobody drunk or sober was even talking about war or independence. On the other side of the Atlantic, however, positions had hardened. The British had an empire around the world to control. If the unruly colonists in America got their way, the other colonies might also be encouraged to rebel. British authority must be enforced by British military might.
Spring, 1774. News of the Boston Tea Party has outraged Parliament. The dumping of British tea in Boston Harbor is seen as an unforgivable provocation.
As far as the British government was concerned, what they had seen happen was a total defiance of the authority of the British state, not in some frontier backwoods area, but a total defiance of the authority of the British state in Boston. How could they deal with that? They could either have let things be, and there were some people who said that may be the way to do it. You know, the Americans are wrong, let it be. That's what I would advise them to do.
In an angry mood, Parliament passes a series of acts designed to restore royal authority in Boston. They install a military governor, General Thomas Gage, and send 2,000 soldiers to back him up. they close the port of Boston. Parliament calls these the coercive acts. The Americans call them the intolerable acts.
If you could close the port of Boston, you could close the port of New York or Philadelphia. If you could undo the Massachusetts Charter, you could undo any of the charters, any of the colonists could have their rights taken away. This was simply intolerable as far as the Americans concerned, that these coercive acts could apply to them as easily as they had applied to Massachusetts.
Up and down the continent, delegates are chosen for what will become known as the First Continental Congress.
In many ways, the First Continental Congress is a delayed reaction. What do you do when you have to respond to something and you don't know how to respond? You call a committee meeting.
John Dickinson of Philadelphia is in the forefront of the growing protest movement.
I'd be very sorry if we did anything which would justly displease our sovereign. But if your neighbor's house is burning, you wouldn't just fold your hands and watch. Let the colonies unite with one spirit in one cause.
In August of 1774, John Adams leaves Boston for Philadelphia. He is to be a Massachusetts delegate to the First Continental Congress. At age 39, Adams has never traveled more than 100 miles from the town where he was born. On the narrow dirt paths of the day, the trip to Philadelphia takes at least 2 weeks. For this country lawyer, it's a big adventure, and he notes all the stops along the way in his diary.
With all its money, there is very little good breeding in New York. Nobody has any manners here. They all talk very fast, very loud, and all together without paying the least attention to one another. If they ask you a question, before you can get 3 words out, they interrupt and go on talking again.
The son of a Braintree farmer, Adams has always resented the rigid system of class and privilege of the day. The first of his family to go to college, he came face to face with this social reality at Harvard.
Harvard students were ranked by their social standing, not by their grades. And Jonathan Sewell, for instance, though he was not a very good student, was ranked higher than a John Adams would be because he came from a distinguished family in Massachusetts.
Adams resented claims of kin and family and blood. He wanted an aristocracy of talent, of merit. And he certainly came into this society with a kind of chip on his shoulder. In 1775, 1776, Adams was in the vanguard of the revolutionary movement and full of the future of America. He saw the whole thing in providential terms as a movement that would transform history. And when the revolution broke out, he knew he was going to be at the center.
What's about to happen is almost too big for my grasp. We don't have men fit for these times. We lack education, experience in the world, money, everything. I feel an unutterable anxiety. God grant us wisdom and strength in the coming months.
For Adams, what happens in Philadelphia will be crucial. He must convince the other colonies to back Massachusetts with deeds as well as words. Without their active support, his colony will be left to face England's military might alone. On September 5th, 1774, 56 delegates to the First Continental Congress gather at Carpenter's Hall. They are the leaders of the colonies, the political bosses, the merchants, the wealthy landowners. From Virginia come lawyer Patrick Henry and planter George Washington. From Massachusetts, political activist and former brewer Samuel Adams, John Adams' cousin. And merchant John Hancock, one of the richest men in America.
The initial confrontation of these people was like seeing foreigners. They spoke the same language, or a reasonable facsimile of the same language, but they were very different people. There was no sense, I think, of unity against the British as yet. I think they saw themselves as Englishmen, and for the most part, people from Massachusetts and people from Virginia who were more in touch with people in London than they were with each other.
It is not in any way certain how the other colonies will respond to the British occupation of Boston. There is the strong suspicion among some of the delegates that the leaders of Massachusetts are hotheads and troublemakers.
I am discovering that this continent is a vast, unwieldy machine. We are 13 colonies, strangers, largely unacquainted with each other, now rushing together in one great mass. It's not surprising that we are jealous of each other's designs, fearful, timid, skittish.
The Congress debates for 2 months. The delegates agree to fully support Massachusetts. They also pass a resolution that the colonies should arm and prepare to defend themselves, if necessary, against any future British aggression. They send a petition to the king, affirming their loyalty and asking for the end of military rule in Boston.
What happens in 1774 is that 13 clocks suddenly begin to strike as one. That's what John Adams said. That's the most important fact of the First Continental Congress. Up to